I'm Clara, 32 female. For my entire life, I've communicated through food. I live in a small but vibrant city where my tiny apartment kitchen has been my laboratory, my sanctuary, and now, the headquarters for my fledgling catering business, Clara's Table. It's a dream I've poured every cent of my savings and every ounce of my soul into. This business wasn't just a career path. It was supposed to be the moment I finally stepped out of the long, perfect shadow cast by my younger sister. My family promised to support me, to give me my first big break. Instead, they handed that break to my sister, whose only culinary qualification was a popular Instagram feed, and in doing so, they turned what should have been my proud debut into a spectacle of public humiliation. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed I would swallow their disrespect and carry on as always. They never imagined that a guest from that disastrous party would hand me the very weapon I needed to serve them a cold, hard dish of the truth. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The planning for my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary began 6 months before the date. It was to be the family event of the decade. Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Joe were the undisputed pillars of our sprawling family, and their diamond anniversary demanded a celebration worthy of their legacy. My mother, Eleanor, naturally took charge. She was a retired teacher who managed family affairs with the same unyielding authority she used to run her third-grade classroom. When she called the first planning committee meeting at her house, I arrived with a leather-bound folder and a heart full of nervous excitement. This was it. This was my chance. My business, Clara's Table Catering, was officially 6 weeks old. I had a business license, a newly minted LLC, a set of gleaming chef's knives, and a handful of small, successful gigs under my belt. A cocktail party for a friend's law firm, a retirement luncheon for a former colleague. But I needed a keystone event, something substantial to build my portfolio on, something that would generate the kind of word-of-mouth buzz that money can't buy. My grandparents' party, with over 100 guests from all walks of life, was the perfect opportunity. I sat at my mother's polished mahogany dining table, my folder resting in front of me. Across from me sat my sister, Serafina. At 28, Sira was and always had been the family's shining star. While I was pragmatic and reserved, she was effervescent and charming. In recent years, she had cultivated a modest but dedicated following as a social media influencer. Her brand was a pastel-hued whirlwind of lifestyle tips, fashion finds, and most recently, food. Her feed was populated with artfully arranged photos of smoothie bowls and avocado toast, each one garnering hundreds of likes and glowing comments. She called herself a food artist, a title that always made my professionally trained eye twitch. "All right, everyone," my mother began, tapping a pen on her notepad. "The main topic for today is catering. It's the biggest expense and the most important part of the guest experience." She looked directly at me, a rare, warm smile on her face. "Clara, honey, this is your moment to shine. We all agreed this party will be the official launch of Clara's Table." A wave of relief so potent it almost made me dizzy washed over me. I had been terrified they would insist on some established, expensive catering hall. "Thank you, Mom. That means the world to me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I opened my folder. "I've actually prepared a preliminary proposal." I spent the next 20 minutes walking them through my vision. I wasn't just planning a menu. I was curating a culinary journey through my grandparents' 60 years together. The appetizers would be inspired by the 1960s, the decade they met and married, deviled eggs with a modern twist, shrimp cocktails in elegant martini glasses. The main course would be a tribute to their honeymoon in Italy, a choice between a perfectly executed braised beef short rib with creamy polenta or a delicate handmade pasta with a light lemon caper sauce. For dessert, alongside a traditional tiered cake, I proposed a sweet table featuring miniature versions of Grandma Margaret's favorite desserts, recipes I had spent years perfecting alongside her in this very house. I had costed everything out, offering them my absolute rock-bottom family rate, which was essentially cost plus 10%, just enough to cover my time and pay a couple of servers I'd hire for the event. I presented sample menus, a detailed timeline for the day, and even a mock-up of the buffet layout. I had poured my heart into this proposal, and as I spoke, I saw my grandmother's eyes well up with tears. "Oh, Clara," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "That is the most thoughtful, wonderful idea I have ever heard. It's perfect." My grandfather, a man of few words, nodded in agreement. "Sounds damn good to me." Even Sierra seemed impressed. "Wow, Clara, that's like a lot of work. The photos of the mini desserts would be super cute for my feed." My mother beamed, her pride palpable. "It's settled then. Clara is our caterer. This is going to be magnificent. It will put your business on the map." The feeling of that moment was intoxicating. It was more than just securing a contract. It was a profound sense of validation from the people whose approval I had craved my entire life. For once, I wasn't the sensible or reliable daughter. I was the talented one, the one they were counting on. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into the project with a fervor I'd never known. I finalized the menu with my grandmother, tweaking recipes to match her memories. I spent days sourcing the best local ingredients, negotiating with suppliers, and building relationships that would be vital for my business long-term. I interviewed and hired 2 professional servers and a bartender, putting down deposits to secure their time. I sketched out plating designs, planned the rental order for linens and dishware, and mapped out the kitchen workflow for the day of the event. Every spare moment was consumed by this party. I turned down 2 other potential gigs, smaller, yes, but paying clients, because I needed to keep the entire week of the anniversary clear for prep. My mother would call for updates, and I would excitedly detail my progress. The custom-printed menus I had designed, the local farm where I had secured the most beautiful seasonal vegetables, the perfect Chianti I'd found to pair with the short ribs. Each call ended with her saying, "Wonderful, honey. We are all so proud of you." The lack of a formal contract barely registered in my mind. This was family. Their word, their enthusiastic and public endorsement, felt more binding than any piece of paper. The entire extended family knew I was catering the party. Aunts and uncles would call me, excited to hear what was on the menu. My cousin even asked if I could make a special nut-free plate for her son. I was not just a vendor, I was an integral part of the celebration. The success of the party and the success of my business felt inextricably linked. Looking back, I can see how perfectly the stage was set. I was standing in the brightest of spotlights, believing it was my moment to shine, never realizing it was only there to make my eventual fall that much more spectacular. The first hint of trouble was a subtle shift in the air, a change in atmospheric pressure that you feel before a storm. About 2 months before the party, my mother's enthusiastic phone calls became less frequent. When I called her to confirm the final guest count for the rental order, she was evasive. "Oh, we're still nailing down the RSVPs, honey. There's no rush on that." A little knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. "There kind of is, Mom," I explained patiently. "The rental company needs final numbers at least 6 weeks out, especially for a Saturday in June. I don't want to risk them not having the inventory we need." "Don't you worry about it," she said with a breezy confidence that didn't quite sound genuine. "Sierra had a wonderful idea about the table settings anyway. We might go in a different direction." My sister's name was a little red flag. "What kind of idea? If it affects the dishware or flatware, I need to know so I can adjust the order." "It's fine, Clara. Just hold off for a bit. We're just exploring some more modern options." The word modern was delivered with a strange emphasis, as if it were a direct counterpoint to something else. My meticulously planned, heartfelt menu suddenly felt, in her framing, old-fashioned and stale. I tried to pin her down on a date to sign a simple agreement. It wasn't about the money, it was about professional practice. I needed to formalize the menu, the guest count, and the payment schedule to finalize bookings with my suppliers and staff. "Mom, could we just sign the contract this week?" It's just a formality, but I need it for my business records. She laughed, a sound that was meant to be light but came out sharp. A contract? Clara, we're family. Don't be so dramatic. It makes it all feel so transactional. Her words stung, expertly crafted to make me feel small and silly for wanting to run my business professionally. I was being dramatic. I was making things transactional. I let it go, telling myself I was being paranoid. This was my mother. She was proud of me. She had said so. The bombshell didn't drop, it was detonated. It happened a week later on a Tuesday evening. I was wrist-deep in flour, testing a new brioche recipe when my phone buzzed incessantly on the counter. It was the family group chat, a digital town square I usually kept muted. But the sheer volume of notifications, pings and dings in rapid succession, signaled something major. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked up the phone. The screen lit up with a message from my mother. It was a long, effusive post, complete with a cascade of sparkling heart emojis. Huge and exciting announcement, family. Party popper after much consideration, we've decided to go in a fresh and vibrant new direction for Mom and Dad's anniversary party. I am absolutely thrilled to announce that our very own talented Serafina will be taking the lead on the catering. She has come up with a chic, modern, tapas-style menu that is just so creative and fun. It's going to be an unforgettable culinary experience. So proud of my girl for taking on this huge challenge. Let's all show her our support, red sparkles. Below the text was a professionally designed digital flyer. It had a picture of Sierra, smiling brightly, with the words Sierra's Creations, curated culinary events emblazoned in a trendy script font. At the bottom, a link directed to a brand new Instagram account. I clicked it, my hand trembling. The account had 6 posts. 6 heavily filtered, top-down photos of dishes, a deconstructed caprese salad served in a martini glass, a single scallop on a smear of beet puree, a skewer of watermelon and feta. The captions were full of buzzwords like hyperlocal, gastronomic journey, and artisanal. It was a perfect facsimile of a professional food account, but to my trained eye, it was all style and no substance. There was no actual food of substance, nothing that could feed 100 people. The blood drained from my face. The phone felt heavy, like a block of ice in my hand. I read my mother's message again, and then a third time, the words blurring through a haze of disbelief and humiliation. She hadn't just replaced me, she had announced it to the entire family without a single word to me beforehand. She had erased my months of work, my emotional investment, and my professional reputation in a single, cheerful group text. The congratulatory messages were already flooding in from cousins and aunts. Wow, go Sierra? That's amazing, can't wait. So cool, Serafina. Not a single person asked, wait, what about Clara? My first call was to my mother. It went straight to voicemail. My second call, too. On the third try, she picked up, her voice a little too bright. Clara, hi honey, did you see the news? I saw the news, I said, my voice dangerously calm. What is going on? Now, don't get upset, she started, immediately on the defensive. Sierra just came to me with this incredible concept, and it felt so much more appropriate for a celebration. Your menu was lovely, dear, but a bit heavy, a bit old-fashioned. Sierra's is so light and chic, and well, it's more Instagrammable. People want an experience they can share online. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Instagrammable? Mom, this is Grandma and Grandpa's 60th anniversary, not a brand launch. And what about my business? You promised me. You told the whole family this would be my launch. And we are so proud of your little business, she said, her tone patronizingly sweet. But Sierra needs this. Her influencing career is really taking off, and an event like this could open so many doors for her. She needs the exposure. And besides, she added, delivering the final, crushing blow, she offered to do it for family, just for the cost of ingredients. We're on a budget, and frankly, your proposal, even with the discount, was quite expensive. The lie was so blatant, so audacious, that it left me breathless. My price was barely above cost. The only way Sierra could be cheaper is if she were using subpar ingredients and not paying for any labor, which, as I would later learn, was exactly her plan. "So you gave away my job, the job you promised me, to my sister because she has a prettier Instagram feed and you think my food is old." The hurt was a physical thing, a tightening in my chest that made it hard to breathe. "You're being overly sensitive, Clara," she sighed, the familiar refrain of my entire childhood. "This is what's best for the party and best for your sister. Family is supposed to support each other. You should be happy for her." I ended the call. I didn't scream or cry. I just stood there in my kitchen, the scent of yeast in the air, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my hard work and my foolish, misplaced trust. She hadn't just taken away a catering gig. She had publicly declared that my passion, my profession, and my dreams were less valuable than my sister's hobby. It was a betrayal so profound it fundamentally altered the way I saw my family and myself within it forever. In the weeks leading up to the anniversary party, I operated in a state of numb self-preservation. I threw myself into my work, taking on any small job I could find to recoup the deposits I'd lost and distract my soul. From the gaping wound my family had left. I baked for farmers' markets, catered small office lunches, and developed menus for phantom clients. Each perfectly roasted vegetable, each flawless sauce, was a silent act of defiance. My kitchen became my fortress. My mother and sister, for their part, acted as if nothing had happened. They'd call and text with breathless updates about the party. "Sierra found the most adorable little bamboo plates. We're doing a signature cocktail with elderflower and gin, isn't that chic?" They were building a narrative in which they were the creative visionaries and I was nothing, an afterthought. To them, my hurt was an inconvenience, my broken promise a minor detail they had already glossed over. Attending the party was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. A part of me wanted to stay home, to shield myself from the inevitable pain. But another, stronger part of me knew I had to go. I had to honor my grandparents, the two people in my family who had never made me feel second best. And if I'm being honest, I needed to see it for myself. I needed to witness the chic, modern, tapas-style menu that had rendered my life's work obsolete. So I put on a simple, elegant dress, held my head high, and walked into the lion's den. The event was held at a beautiful rented hall with large windows overlooking a garden. The decorations were lovely, a testament to my mother's impeccable taste in everything except, it seemed, caterers. I greeted my grandparents, hugging them tightly and giving them my gift. They looked wonderful, happy, and completely oblivious to the drama that had unfolded behind the scenes. For that, I was grateful. Then I saw the food. It was set up on two long tables against a far wall. My professional eye immediately started cataloging the errors. There were no chafing dishes to keep hot food hot. Instead, aluminum pans sat directly on the tablecloths, their contents rapidly congealing in the air-conditioned room. There were no sneeze guards, no serving utensils for half the dishes, and the flow was completely illogical, with salads placed after the main courses. Sierra stood near the tables, not serving but posing. She was wearing a white chef's coat that was clearly a prop. It was pristine, without a single smudge or spatter. She held her phone in one hand, snapping photos and taking selfies with guests who came up to the buffet. She wasn't a caterer. She was playing one for social media. I took a plate, my curiosity overriding my dread. The tapas-style menu consisted of limp-looking chicken skewers, a large bowl of what looked like store-bought potato salad, a tray of meatballs in a watery barbecue sauce, and the deconstructed, caprese salads I'd seen on her Instagram. They were even sadder in person, a few cherry tomatoes and a single ball of mozzarella swimming in balsamic glaze at the bottom of a plastic cup. I put a meatball and a chicken skewer on my plate and retreated to a quiet corner. I cut into the chicken. It was pink in the middle, not just slightly undercooked, but raw. I discreetly wrapped it in a napkin and put it back on my plate. The meatball was lukewarm and tasted freezer-burnt. This wasn't just bad cooking, it was a public health hazard. As the evening wore on, the whispers started. I saw my cousin surreptitiously spit a piece of chicken into her napkin. I overheard an uncle muttering to my aunt, "Did you try that potato salad? Tastes fizzy." Another guest, a friend of my grandmother's, asked a passing server. One of Sierra's high school-aged friends roped in to help if there was a vegetarian option. The girl looked panicked and said, I think there's salad." The whole time, my mother floated around the room like the queen of the ball, praising her younger daughter's genius. "Isn't this amazing?" she'd say to anyone who would listen. "Serafina is just a natural talent, so much more exciting than a boring sit-down dinner." Whenever she saw me, she would offer a tight, brittle smile and move on, as if my very presence was an accusation. My sister was oblivious. She was in her own world, curating her event. At one point, I saw her directing her friend to hold up a tray of the sad caprese salads while she took a photo with her phone, no doubt for a future post captioned, "Another successful event." She wasn't concerned with the quality of the food or the experience of the guests. She was only concerned with the appearance of success. The public humiliation was complete. Everyone there, all the people who had known for months that I was supposed to be the caterer, saw this disaster and saw me watching it unfold. They saw my mother fawning over my sister, the usurper. The story was clear for anyone to read. Clara had been deemed not good enough, cast aside for the new, shiny, more exciting model. And now I was forced to be a spectator at my own execution. I couldn't take it anymore. I found my grandparents, told them I was feely, and a bit unwell, and gave them one last hug before slipping out a side door. I walked to my car, the cool night air feeling like a balm on my burning cheeks. I didn't cry. The hurt was too deep for tears. It had solidified into something cold and hard in the pit of my stomach. It was a feeling of profound injustice, of being so completely and utterly undervalued by the people who were supposed to love me most. As I drove home, I knew that this wasn't just a slight or a misunderstanding. It was a public statement of my worth in my family, and it was worth nothing. The days after the party were a blur of hollow-hearted routine. I woke up, went to my kitchen, baked, cooked, and cleaned. I fulfilled orders with a robotic efficiency, my mind a million miles away. My parents and sister sent a flurry of texts in the family chat, posting Sierra's carefully curated photos from the party and thanking everyone for coming. They were whitewashing the event, creating an official history that bore no resemblance to reality. In their version, the party was a roaring success, and Sierra was the toast of the town. My early departure was noted by my mother with a passive-aggressive text sent only to me. "Sorry you weren't feeling well and had to miss the end of the party." Sierra's dessert table was a huge hit. I didn't respond. There were no words. I was marooned on an island of my own silent anger, with no idea how to build a bridge back to any sort of normalcy. I felt powerless, silenced by the family narrative. If I complained, I was jealous. If I pointed out the truth, I was bitter. So I said nothing. The phone call that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon, 5 days after the party. The caller ID showed Aunt Carol, and my first instinct was to ignore it. Aunt Carol was my mother's older sister, a retired nurse who was pragmatic and no-nonsense. While I loved her, I wasn't in the mood for a gentle lecture about family unity. But a second before it went to voicemail, I swiped to answer. "Clara, honey, is this a bad time?" Her voice was warm but carried an undertone of seriousness. "No, Aunt Carol, it's fine. I'm just prepping some vegetables," I lied, sitting down at my small kitchen table. "Good, listen, I'm calling to see how you are. Really, how are you?" The genuine concern in her voice cracked the dam I had so carefully constructed. My eyes welled up. I'm fine," I said, my voice wavering. She didn't buy it for a second. "No, you're not, and you have every right not to be. What your mother and sister did to you was disgraceful. I told Alina as much, but it's like talking to a brick wall." A single tear traced a path down my cheek. "It was just so public," I whispered. "Everyone saw." "Yes, they did," Aunt Carol said, her voice turning grim. "But I don't think you know what they saw after you left. Honey, you witnessed a mild disaster. What happened in the last hour of that party was a full-blown catastrophe." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she began, her nurse's voice kicking in, all clinical precision, "that the food wasn't just bad, it was dangerous. You know your cousin Mark, Susan's husband? He's a type 1 diabetic. He ate 2 of those chicken skewers, assuming they were just grilled chicken. There was some kind of sugary glaze on them Sierra never mentioned. His blood sugar spiked so high he had to leave and administer extra insulin. He was sick as a dog all night. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Oh my God, is he okay? He's fine now, but Susan was furious. Then there's the issue of the chicken itself. You were right to be suspicious. At least a dozen people I spoke to had the same experience. It was raw in the middle. George, your uncle, has been dealing with, well, let's just say a very upset stomach for the past 3 days. He's convinced it was the chicken or that fizzy potato salad. She continued, painting a grim picture of the party's aftermath. The beautiful tiered cake my mother had mentioned in her text. Sierra had assigned her 2 teenage friends to bring it from the kitchen to the main hall. They were busy texting, and one of them tripped. The entire top tier of the cake slid off and landed face down on the carpet. Sierra, instead of apologizing, had a meltdown and blamed the venue for having slippery floors. They ended up serving the slightly squashed, hair-covered bottom tier, cutting away the worst parts. But here's the kicker, Aunt Carol said, her voice low and angry. Your mother and Serafina know all of this. They've been getting calls, but they're in full cover-up mode. They're telling people it must have been a stomach bug going around or that the venue's ovens weren't working properly. They are lying through their teeth to protect Serafina's ego and this ridiculous Sierra's Creations fantasy she's cooked up. Every word she said was a piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. My hurt, which had been a nebulous emodio now thing, was now crystallizing into something sharp and clear. This was no longer just about my wounded feelings or a stolen opportunity. This was about negligence. It was about my sister's dangerous incompetence and my mother's reckless enablement. They hadn't just humiliated me, they had endangered the health of their own family and friends and then lied about it. Why are you telling me all this, Aunt Carol? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Because the truth needs to come out, she said firmly. And because you deserve justice. You are a professional, Clara. You would never in a million years have let any of that happen. Your family chose spectacle over substance, and they need to be held accountable for the consequences. I don't know what you're going to do with this information, but you needed to have it. You're not the crazy, jealous one here. You're the one who was right all along. We talked for another half hour. She gave me the names of other relatives who had been sick or disappointed. She told me how my grandparents were feeling embarrassed, fielding awkward calls from their old friends who were trying to be polite about the terrible food. The official family narrative was already crumbling at the edges. It just needed a firm push. When I hung up the phone, the world looked different. The haze of depression had lifted, replaced by a cold, burning anger. But it was a focused anger, a productive anger. My aunt had given me a gift more valuable than sympathy. She had given me facts, evidence. She had given me the truth. And as I sat there in my quiet kitchen, a plan began to form. They thought they had buried me under a mountain of public humiliation. They had no idea that all they'd done was plant a seed. And now, it was beginning to grow. For 2 full days after my call with Aunt Carol, I did nothing. I let the information settle, let my anger cool from a raging fire to a set of hot, determined coals. I knew that a direct confrontation would be a disaster. If I called my mother and accused Sierra of poisoning the family, I would be met with a hailstorm of denials, accusations, and gaslighting. I would be cast, once again, in my designated role, the jealous, dramatic older sister who couldn't stand to see her sibling succeed. They would circle the wagons, and the truth would be buried forever under a new layer of their manufactured reality. No, a direct assault was a fool's errand. A professional chef knows that the best dishes are often about timing and temperature control. You can't rush a good braise, you have to let it cook low and slow, letting the tough parts break down naturally until they are fall-apart tender. My plan would be the same. I needed to let the truth simmer. I wouldn't expose them. I would create the perfect environment for them to expose themselves. My opening came via a text from my grandmother. She was, in her own quiet way, mortified by how the party had turned out. Dear Clara, she wrote. "I was so sorry you had to leave the party early. I am afraid the food was not quite what we had hoped. I am thinking of having a small lunch here next Sunday for just the immediate family to properly thank everyone and smooth things over. Would you be able to come?" This was it. This was the venue. A small gathering with all the key players present, but a lunch at my grandmother's house still gave my mother and sister the home field advantage. I needed to control the environment. I called my grandmother back immediately. "Grandma, that's a wonderful idea," I said, my voice full of warmth. "But you and Grandpa have done so much already. You shouldn't have to lift a finger. Please let me host it at my apartment. It would be my honor. I'll cook a simple, lovely lunch for everyone. No fuss, just a nice, relaxing family meal. My treat." I framed it as a gesture of peace, an olive branch, and, as I predicted, my grandmother was touched and relieved. "Oh, Clara, that is so generous of you. Are you sure, after everything?" "I'm sure," I said, cutting her off gently. "It's what family does." The next step was to get my mother and sister to agree. I knew they would be suspicious of my motives, so I sent a message to my mother, laying the groundwork. "Hi, Mom. Grandma told me about the idea for a family make-up lunch. I offered to host and cook at my place. I think it's a good idea for us to all move past the awkwardness of the party. What's done is done. Let's just have a nice meal together." The phrase, "what's done is done," was the bait. It signaled surrender. It implied that I was willing to forget the whole sordid affair and return to the status quo. To them, my offer to cook would look like an act of submission, a sign that I knew my place and was ready to resume my role as the family doormat. It would feed their egos, and their egos were my primary target. My mother called me within minutes. "Clara, that's a very mature and gracious offer," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Serafina and I would be delighted to come. She was saying just the other day how bad she feels that you were so upset about everything." The lie was so bald-faced it was almost funny, but I played along. "Great, so we'll see you Sunday at 1? It will be me, you and Dad, Grandma and Grandpa, Sierra, and Aunt Carol." Including Aunt Carol was a calculated risk. She was my ally, but she was also a terrible liar. I called her separately to brief her on the plan. "Aunt Carol," I said, "I need you to come to lunch on Sunday, but more importantly, I need you to just be yourself. When the topic of the party comes up, I don't want you to defend me. I just want you to be honest about what you saw and heard." "Clara," she said, a hint of steel in her voice, "you don't have to ask me to be honest. It's what I do best. I'll be there." With the guest list confirmed and the trap set, I began to prepare. But I wasn't just planning a menu, I was staging a one-act play. The food itself had to be a character in this drama. It couldn't be overly fancy or elaborate. That would give them an opening to call me a show-off. It needed to be simple, elegant, and above all, technically perfect. It had to be everything their meal was not: safe, delicious, and made with genuine care. I decided on a menu of comfort and quiet sophistication. I would make a slow-roasted chicken, seasoned simply with lemon, thyme, and garlic, a direct, unspoken rebuttal to Sierra's undercooked skewers. The chicken would be juicy, the skin crispy and golden brown. I would serve it with creamy, buttery mashed potatoes, so unlike the fizzy potato salad and tender crisp green beans from the farmer's market. For a starter, a simple, seasonal salad with a homemade vinaigrette. For dessert, a classic apple pie made from scratch with my grandmother's recipe. It was a meal that said, "This is what real food, made with love and skill, tastes like." The day before the lunch, I cleaned my apartment until it gleamed. I bought fresh flowers and set the table with my best dishes. I prepped all my ingredients, my movements precise and calm. As I worked, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't driven by a petty need for revenge. This was about reclamation. I was reclaiming my professional dignity, my narrative, and my place as a competent adult whose work deserved respect. They had tried to define me by one humiliating public failure that they had engineered. On Sunday, I would give them a private, undeniable success, and I would force them to choke on it. Sunday arrived, bright and clear. My apartment was filled with the warm, comforting aroma of roasting chicken and baking apples. It smelled like home, like truth. I was calm, my nerves settled into a quiet hum of anticipation. I knew my lines. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. My family arrived in stages. My grandparents first, their faces softening as they took in the scene. "Oh, Clara, this is just lovely," my grandmother said, kissing my cheek. Aunt Carol was next, giving me a subtle, reassuring nod as she handed me a bottle of wine. Finally, my parents and Serafina arrived. My mother swept in, surveying my small apartment with a critical eye. Sira followed, looking bored, scrolling through her phone as if she had somewhere more important to be. "Something smells good," my father, a man who generally stayed out of the family crossfire, offered kindly. "Yes, it's very domestic," my mother added, the compliment landing like a veiled insult. We made small talk for a while. I served drinks and some simple cheese and crackers. Sira took a photo of her wine glass against the light from the window, no doubt crafting a caption in her head. My mother steered the conversation to Sira's burgeoning career, talking about a brand that had sent her a free handbag. It was all a carefully constructed performance of a happy, successful family. Finally, I called everyone to the table. I brought the food out, placing the platters in the center. The chicken was magnificent, perfectly browned. The mashed potatoes were fluffy, the green beans a vibrant green. There was an unconscious, collective sigh of appreciation from everyone except my mother and sister. I served my grandparents first, then my parents and aunt, then Sira, and finally myself. As people began to eat, a comfortable silence fell over the table, the kind that only happens when food is genuinely good. "Clara, my goodness," my grandfather said after his first bite of chicken. "This is the best chicken I've had in years." "The potatoes are wonderful, dear," my grandmother added. My mother, however, was not to be so easily won over. After a few bites, she dabbed her lips with her napkin and gave me a condescending smile. "This is nice, Clara. Very nice. See, you're so good at these small, simple things. A cozy family meal is really your strength." There it was, the opening I had been waiting for. The dismissal, the pat on the head, the final assertion of her narrative where I was the quaint, domestic cook and Sira was the exciting, modern artist. I put my fork down gently. I looked at her, my expression calm and neutral. "I'm glad you're all enjoying a properly cooked meal," I said, my voice even and clear, cutting through the table's chatter. "It's important to be careful with food safety. The last thing anyone wants is for their guests to get sick." The air thickened. Sira stopped chewing and looked up from her plate. My mother's smile froze on her face. "What an odd thing to say," she said, her voice tight. I turned my gaze to my sister. I was just thinking about the party. I was so worried when I heard how many people felt unwell afterwards. Sira scoffed, pushing her plate away slightly. "Oh my God, are you still on that? Nobody got sick. That is such a ridiculous, jealous rumor." "That's right," my mother chimed in, her voice rising to Sira's defense. "A few people had a touch of a stomach bug that was going around. It had absolutely nothing to do with Serafina's wonderful food." I didn't argue. I simply looked across the table at Aunt Carol. "Is that what you heard, Aunt Carol?" My aunt, bless her honest soul, put her fork down and looked my mother dead in the eye. "No, Alina, that is not what I heard. I heard from Susan that Mark's blood sugar went dangerously high because of an undisclosed sugary glaze. And I heard from George that he spent 2 days in the bathroom after eating undercooked chicken. And I heard from at least 3 other people that the food was cold, unappetizing, and in some cases inedible. It wasn't a stomach bug. It was negligence." The silence that followed was deafening. Sira's face went from pale to beet red. My mother looked at her sister with pure fury. "How dare you? You're taking Clara's side. You're just trying to hurt Serafina." "I'm not on anyone's side," Aunt Carol said calmly. "I'm on the side of the truth." "It's all lies," Sira cried, her voice cracking. "They're making it up because they're jealous of me." This was my cue. "Is Susan lying, Sira?" I asked quietly. "Is Cousin Mark's diabetes a lie?" I reached for my phone, which I had placed on the sideboard behind me. I was so concerned after I heard about Mark, I called Susan to check on him. I recorded the conversation because I wanted to be sure I understood what happened. I pressed play. Susan's voice filled the quiet room, angry and clear. "It was so irresponsible, Clara. Mark trusts us to know what's in the food at family functions. The chicken was pink, the salad was warm, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Your mother should have hired you." I stopped the recording. My mother's mouth was hanging open. My sister looked like she had been struck. My grandparents looked from me to them, their expressions a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. I wasn't finished. "This was never about a chic menu or a modern style," I said, my voice steady and strong, looking directly at my mother. "This was about you. You have spent our entire lives propping Sierra up and pushing me down. You took my dream, the one thing I have ever been truly passionate about, and you handed it to her as a party favor. You didn't just hurt my feelings. You damaged my professional reputation, and you endorsed a level of incompetence that put this family's health at risk. You chose her ego over my career, and you chose it over the safety of your own husband, your own mother, and everyone else in that room." I let the words hang in the air. There was nothing left to say. The truth, in all its ugly, undeniable glory, was finally served. And for the first time in my life, they had no choice but to eat it. The explosion that followed the lunch was not loud and fiery, but a series of quiet, seismic shocks that reconfigured our family's landscape permanently. In the stunned silence of my dining room, my grandmother was the first to speak. She looked at my mother, her daughter, with an expression of profound disappointment that was more cutting than any anger. "Eleanor," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "your father and I trusted you with our celebration. It was meant to be a day about love and family. You turned it into a pageant for your daughter's vanity, and you lied to us about it." My mother tried to stammer out a defense, but for once, the words wouldn't come. Sierra just sat there, tears streaming down her face, not tears of remorse, but tears of a child who had finally been told no. The lunch ended quickly after that. My parents and sister left in a tense, stony silence. My grandparents and Aunt Carol stayed to help me clear the dishes, though I insisted they didn't have to. The three of them wrapped me in a group hug before they left. "We are so proud of you, Clara," my grandfather said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for your cooking, but for your courage." In the days that followed, the consequences of that lunch rippled outwards. My grandparents had a long, private conversation with my mother. I don't know exactly what was said, but the result was that my mother called me. It wasn't the heartfelt apology I might have once dreamed of. It was stilted and defensive, full of justifications and blame shifting. "I'm sorry your feelings were hurt, Clara, but you have to understand the pressure I was under." I didn't accept it. "An apology isn't about explaining why you were right to hurt me, Mom," I said calmly. "It's about acknowledging that you were wrong." I told her and Sierra, on a conference call that my mother insisted upon, what a real apology would look like. First, they would need to reimburse me for the lost deposits and the 2 gigs I turned down, a concrete acknowledgement of the financial damage they'd caused. Second, Sierra would have to post a public statement on her social media, not to praise me, but to admit that she was not a professional caterer, that the event was beyond her capabilities, and to correct the false impression that it had been a success. It was a matter of professional integrity. They balked, of course. The money was an issue, but the public admission was the real deal-breaker. It would shatter the carefully crafted illusion of Sierra's creations. Sierra wailed that I was trying to ruin her brand. My mother accused me of being vindictive. "I'm not being vindictive," I stated, my voice devoid of anger. "I'm setting a boundary. You don't get to damage my career and then pretend everything is fine. So here is the new reality. Until a real apology is made, my relationship with you both is changing. I will be civil at family holidays for the sake of Grandma and Grandpa, but I am no longer available. Not for favors, not for emotional support, not for advice, and not to be your audience. My energy is going into my business. We are done." And we were. The silence that followed that decision was vast and, to my surprise, peaceful. I channeled all my focus into Clara's table. The story of the party, a version much closer to the truth, inevitably got out. Aunt Carol and other relatives who had been at the disastrous event became my most vocal champions. They hired me for their own events, christenings, birthday parties, small dinner gatherings. They told their friends who told their friends. My grandparents, as their own quiet act of restitution, gave me a small loan, which I insisted on documenting with a formal repayment plan. It allowed me to invest in a commercial-grade food warmer and other essential equipment, expanding my capabilities. My business grew slowly, organically, built on a foundation of reliability and quality, the very things my mother had dismissed as old-fashioned. My food wasn't Instagrammable in the trendy, fleeting way Sierra S was. It was just good. And it turned out that for most people, that was more than enough. A year later, my life is unrecognizable. Clara's Table Catering is a success. I have a steady stream of clients and have even hired a part-time assistant. I'm looking at moving into a small commercial kitchen space. I am respected for my work, judged on my own merits. My relationship with my mother and sister remains distant. They never apologized, and I never expected them to. We see each other at Christmas and Easter, and our conversations are polite, brief, and shallow. Sierra's influencer career never recovered. Word travels fast in a family, and the tale of the disastrous anniversary party became a quiet cautionary tale. Her brand withered from a lack of credibility. Sometimes, I feel a pang of sadness for the relationship we might have had. But then I remember the cold, hard feeling of public humiliation, and the sadness fades. I learned the hardest lesson of my life that year. Sometimes the people who are supposed to be your biggest cheerleaders are actually your heaviest anchors. Cutting them loose was the only way I could ever truly learn to swim. I found my own recipe for happiness, and it was beautifully simple. It was built with fresh ingredients, self-respect, strong boundaries, and the quiet, profound satisfaction of work well done. And it tasted like freedom.